Every
Mhm.
dog is different. That's actually our show model is every dog is different and every human is too. And so I like for people to not focus on breed so much either, but most people are very breed focused. They know what breed their dogs are. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the place where no one feels alone in the mess and the magic of dog life. Today I'm joined by Annie Grossman, dog trainer, educator, and author of How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science. In this episode, we're diving into the stories behind the book, the dog who started it all, and the powerful shift that happens when we lead with curiosity, compassion, and connection. Whether you're just starting out or you've been in the training world for a while, this is one of those conversations that remind you why we do this work. Let's get into it. We have a copy of her book right here. Start us out today by telling us a little bit about why you started writing and the dog that inspired you.
I actually started out as a writer. Right out of college, I started working at newspapers. I was writing a lot of lifestyle kind of stuff. And then around 2008, 2009, the economy changed. The media world changed. There was definitely a move away from print media, which is what I was doing. And I was like, I think I just want to find something else to do with my life. And, I'd always loved dogs. I'd been a dog walker, from the age of 10. I do not recommend hiring a 10-year-old dog walker, by the way. But I was one. I grew up in New York City, and I used to walk my neighbors' dogs for $1 a walk. I always loved training my dog. I really didn't know what I was doing, but it was fun. I had this wonderful little Yorkie poo named Amos, who was the light of my life, and I loved spending time with him. I remember I was spending a lot of time at the dog park doing a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I was like, I just love being at the dog park and watching dogs and talking to people about their dogs and learning about dogs. Maybe I should do something with dogs. And I ended up getting into a conversation at the dog park one day with someone whose father had just graduated from the Karen Pryor Academy for animal training and behavior. I had looked into some programs, and they all seemed too eager to take my money. But the more that I talked to him, and then I got in touch with his father, the more I felt like, okay, this seems like a really legit vocational school. And I applied. I really knew nothing about dog training, which I think is kind of unusual. I think a lot of people go into Karen Pryor Academy with a lot of experience under their belt to kind of get that accreditation and finesse their skills. I went in just a total blank slate, really found it transformative. Not only did it get me, super excited about this idea of having a career working with dogs, but it also just made me see the whole world anew, because it really introduced me to the science of behavior and animal training as they teach it, as a technology of that science. I don't think I was aware that there was a science of behavior. At best, maybe I thought it was kind of like a pseudoscience. But I got really interested in nerding out on where did this come from? Who figured this out? How did this develop? And that was 2010. I just kind of started reading everything I could get my hands on about the development of the science of behavior over the last century or so. And when I graduated Karen Pryor Academy, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go be a dog trainer now. Couldn't quite figure out how to get started. There was no one around who seemed like a obvious mentor that I wanted to work with. And I got it in my head, if I had a space, I feel like if I had a space people could come to, so much about training, I believe, is the environment. The environment dictates behavior. And I felt like I really wanted to have an environment I could control and bring people to and have essentially a school. So I moved all my furniture out of my Manhattan living room and put in a Murphy bed and started what I called School for the Dogs, and had group classes and did private lessons. And for me, it was really key to having that space sort of helped me conceive of how I wanted to exist in the world as a dog trainer and how I wanted to work with people. And it was an amazing success right off the bat, and I expanded to progressively larger locations over the next few years, and ultimately ended up in this beautiful 2-story facility on East 7th Street in Manhattan. I think at its height, we had something like 15 trainers, and we're seeing hundreds of dogs every month. And all the while I was running this business, I was also in my head writing this book about how to train dogs and about understanding the science of behavior through dog training, and sort of trying to convey to people how dog training, yes, it's about getting your dog to walk nicely on leash and not pee on the carpet and not jump on people and this, that, and the other, but that there are so many lessons that we can learn through training our dogs about how we exist in the world, how we relate to each other, how we are trained by forces beyond our control. I'm so excited the book is out there. Also because I think dog training in a lot of ways is unfortunately a luxury. Certainly doing it in New York City was not something that I could easily provide to people on a budget. Had to often charge more than I wanted to charge because so much of what we were doing was on site too. That limited the amount of people we could work with. So I'm just glad this book is out there because I feel like it's low price point. It's like $12 or whatever. I don't think it's a majorly comprehensive guide, but my goal was to write something that would just tweak people's point of view and get them started on the right foot, get them asking the right questions, get them finding the right people to work with, and sort of seeing things in a way that I hope is refreshing and that clears away some of the static out there about dogs and training.
You did a beautiful job of that in the book. You touched on a lot of things here that I want to touch on today, so that's phenomenal. First of all, I was also a 12-year-old dog walker and pet sitter. I started at a very young age, and I'm also a really huge dog nerd. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today because I feel like they get a lot deeper when we both have the background in it, but we also have our unique individual viewpoints on things. So it opens up the discussion a little bit more for the listeners, which is always super fun. Something that you just touched on there in your little spiel was accessibility and cost point, because nowadays that's like a huge thing. Dog training, being able to train your dog is a privilege. The world just keeps getting more and more and more expensive, and people who want to train their dogs go and they check out videos on YouTube and they stumble onto somebody that you mentioned quite frequently in your book, which is Cesar Millan. And then they end up putting their dogs in these bad situations without even realizing that they're doing it. And now, of course, we have to go back through learning things and figuring out what we did wrong because they've created bad scenarios in their home without even realizing it. And I think that it's so terrible that there's so much content out there that's like that because it causes there to be so much conflict in our homes and put animals in danger of losing their lives, putting people in danger of getting bit or harmed by dogs just because dogs are scared. And I really wish that there was more regulation on those kinds of things and how they're available and accessible and who's allowed to do it, because it is dangerous in so many different ways. And I don't think that people think about that. And that was one of the reasons that I started this whole thing.
It's dangerous. It's a completely unregulated field, especially in America. I have a podcast, so same name as the book, How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science. And last year I did an episode where I was calling around to buy shock collars. I wasn't actually buying it, but I was just trying to see if you want to buy a shock collar, what happens if you just ask basic questions. The things these people on the phone said were just ridiculous. At one point I said to one person, I think it was maybe Chewy.com, whoever answered the phone at Chewy.com. I said, okay, if I have my 5-year-old daughter do this with me with my dog? And she was like, no, I think that should be no problem. I've gotten the feedback that my book has too much criticism of the dog whisperer and some other dog trainers, especially in the world of positive reinforcement dog training, where it's all about encouraging the behaviors you like. There can be the idea of like, you shouldn't put anyone else down. But I do agree with you. I think it's really dangerous. I think it's dangerous because so much information out there that is free and accessible is at best dated and useless, and at worst, it can really cause harm to dogs and to people. And that's why, rather than pointing out every example of poor dog training out there, I kind of use Cesar Millan as like a stand-in for, all the bad dog training out there. As an example, and sort of as a way to say, like, okay, let's step back and think about the science. Let's think about dog training as it relates to the science of behavior, because it's a lot harder to argue about science than it is about so many of these kind of opaque things that people like he are saying about, energy and dominance and things that are hard to define. Energy for me is a really big pet peeve kind of word, because I feel like so many people just sort of take for granted as if energy is so important with dog training. It's like, okay, but what does that actually look like?
Well, what does it mean, right? Because energy could be so many different things. Is it the time and energy, like effort that you're putting into it? Or is it the state of mind that you're in? Or is it the feelings of the dog and how they're responding to whatever it is that you're doing? I mean, energy could be so many different things. And
It's
without
so
those
many, it's so many
definitions,
things. And I think we're so egocentric in thinking that my dog's problems are my problems. I do blame a lot of that on like the reality TV world where it's all about, the metamorphosis of the person. And, I think of the book, I can say like, a lot of these episodes might as well be about kitchen renovation. Like it's about finding the lesson in yourself as it relates to your dog. Whereas I would say to people all the time when they would come to school for the dog, your dog's issues, they might be because of you, but more often than not, like the people bringing in their dogs who have real issues to a dog trainer are really incredible people who are taking that time and effort to find the help they need for their dog. And their dog's issues are most likely not because of them. If we could just get rid of that trope, that would make me happy.
I'm salty with social media because it's all about look at how beautiful our Instagram life looks. And it's really not like that. But I agree with you because the people that come to dog trainers are usually not the problem. There is something deeper that is going on there. I know that from personal experience because my dog Fitz is the reason that I became a dog trainer. I was a vet tech before and a pet sitter and dog walker, and I did all of the dog things all of my life. But when I got him and he became this difficult dog, I realized that I needed to change some things in my life. And he really made me look at things differently with dogs and learn how to understand behavior as a science and really look at the depth of character that dogs actually have. The hardest part for me as somebody who's loved dogs and been involved with dogs all my life is that I never saw dogs not being unique individuals that had thoughts and personalities of their own. That just was second nature to me. So when I come across all these people that don't understand that dogs are unique individuals with thoughts and feelings of their own, I'm always like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense to me because it's just like any other living creature. We have to go through the motions of living. And without us as humans to take care of them and feed them and give them a place to sleep and all that stuff, they would find their own way to do that because they're dogs. They understand how resources work. It just floors me that people are like, well, I don't understand why he would do that, or why would he do that to me? We take things so personally when it's really not about us at all. It's really just how they think.
We take things personally, and also we do so much projection. I remember I had one client who was always talking about like how spoiled rotten her dog was and what a diva her dog was. And I was like, I don't experience your dog that way, but you do, and I can't argue with you about it. It's true. And just the fact that we're so used to saying, good dogs and bad dogs, the word good and bad attaching it, talk like dogs aren't good or bad. Like they're just really good at being dogs. Like they're just doing what works. And sometimes aggression is what works. Right. And that's why we have aggressive dogs there. But it's so easy for people to put some sort of agenda behind it. My dog is being spiteful or stubborn or this or that. So that's something else I try and do in the book is like, how can we like think about this in a more objective way? As part of the research for the book, I did dive pretty deep into the Cesar Millan oeuvre. And I think one of my favorite parts of the book is where I point out how he goes on and on about Oprah. He was on Oprah, but he talks about Oprah as the way to get your dog to behave is to be Oprah. You need to have that kind of Oprah energy, and then your dog will actually listen to you. Everybody respects Oprah, and Oprah doesn't have to prove who she is. He goes on about other people too, weirdly like Cleopatra. Be more Cleopatra. But then he actually goes and works with Oprah and her dog, and he's taking her to task for having a dog who doesn't listen to her. It's like even Oprah, he's like disappointed with how Oprah is with her own dog, which is just like, I mean, it's entertaining, but this is not actually like helpful information. I've never told a client to be more Oprah.
It's phenomenal that there are so many instances in your book where you show the backtrack of that. You do a really good job of saying, this is exactly what he portrayed, or this is exactly what I witnessed. And then this is how I broke it down and can show you a different point of view on this, which is what a lot of people really need because we have been force fed this culture of dogs so much that we have all of these expectations and these beliefs of dogs. that are not actually true.
Yeah. And I also think we tend to think about dog training as very like prescriptive. Like
Yes.
you need to follow this recipe. I'm sitting next to a shelf of dog training books, and most of them make me want to fall asleep because they're recipe books. Okay, this is how you do house training. This is how you do down. And I guess there's a place for that. But I wanted to write something that felt more like a story, that felt more like you want to actually follow the thread of where this is going and make you actually like think in a larger way, so that you can then tackle those issues one by one from a point of view that makes sense, even if I don't go into detail about what specifically to do when your dog is jumping, but that you can use this sort of point of view shift to approach that on your own. And like you said, not everyone is going to be able to afford a dog trainer or have access to a dog trainer, but I almost think of it like exercising or eating. Ideally, everyone kind of knows the basics there. And then if you're lucky, you can find a really good coach to hold your hand, help you refine what you're doing, someone who's further down the path than you are, which is another thing. Dog trainers are not born with special talents, and that is another myth that's out there. A couple months ago, I saw a girl I went to high school with at another friend's house, and I was hanging out with her dog, and she was like, "My dog is just drawn to you. You have special abilities." And I was like, I actually don't think that's true, but I think it's like the sticky idea. You want to see me as a magical dog person, when in fact, the best dog trainers are not born with special energy. They've just figured out how to clear away the static. If you can find somebody who knows more than you do, and ideally has some certifications, only just because we were saying that's like, it's such an unregulated industry. Truth is, I think a lot of the certifications don't even mean anything, but at least it's something.
I'm studying for the CPD TKA. I haven't completed it. I can actually show you guys right here. Here is all 300 of my flashcards for the test. It's a whole thing. But I have taken other things like Kim Brophy's legs course. I've taken Michael Shikashio's aggressive dog course. I have, like you, had an entire bookshelf of books that I have read or listened to. I have had many conversations like this. And obviously, through 30 years of working with animals, I have obtained a certain level of knowledge. But I agree with you. It's not so much that we have this special aura or these special skills. It's that we understand dogs and we know how to appropriately approach them in a way that's not necessarily, I don't want to make it like a blanket statement kind of thing, but we know how to approach dogs for the most part in a way that almost every dog is going to be receptive to it, because that's how they're designed. And we understand that about the nature of dogs. Whereas everybody else is like, here, let me sniff my hand.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I wish every kid had an hour of education on dog body language. I mean, every adult too, but if we could start earlier, because you don't need a semester of it. You just need a little bit of information to be able to spot some basic ways in which dogs are telling us they're uncomfortable. And if you can tell if a dog is uncomfortable, you can change the situation, get the dog out of the situation, et cetera, which is going to make it much less likely that, you're going to get bit in the face and your dog is going to have to be put down and all of that. Instead, I talk about in the book how, like, once you kind of can read dog body language, it becomes really painful to, I don't know, watch the dog whisper, or even like scroll through Instagram, especially on like Halloween time. It's always like, oh my God, it's all these dogs dressed up looking like they're being tortured, and people are like, look how cute Benji looks.
or even just in daily life, you go to the farmer's market and there's all these dogs that are like, oh my God, why am I here? You think that you're doing something nice for your dog, but you're actually stressing your dog the fuck out.
Yeah. And dog trainers in general, tell me, maybe you don't agree with this, but my experience of most dog trainers is they don't want to talk about the science with clients. I do think it's a good idea to stay away from jargon, but I also think that science seems scary, where I've always felt the opposite. I've always felt like you can understand like classical conditioning and operant conditioning pretty well. I can give you like a 10-minute education on those two things. In the book, I talk about like classical conditioning is basically learning by association. Operant conditioning is basically learning by consequence. And just a quick education in like a 5th grade level education in that aspect of the science, I think, goes a long way. And especially what goes a long way, I think, is thinking about how dogs are feeling and how we can change those feelings using classical condition, or AKA learning by association. When you're starting out, at least, it's so much more important to help a dog feel good than it is to think about their behaviors. And we tend to think about dog training as sit down, stay, leave it, drop it. I've been working at the ASPCA for the last month with a lot of dogs who come in like really shut down. And a lot of what the pro trainers are doing for the first 5-6 hours they might be spending with that dog is feeding the dog cheese. You have professional dog trainers there feeding the dog cheese because you just want the dog to feel kind of good about being there and being around these new people. And that can be dog training right there. When I'm walking with my girls, I have 2 little girls and they love saying hi to dogs on the street all the time. They go up to a dog and they're like, can I pet your dog? And they know to ask. And then the person is like, yes. Stella, sit. And I'm like, no. Stella, just be cute. You have these 2 little girls coming up to the dog, New York City street, crazy enough. Don't start asking the dog to do these behaviors they may or may not know in this stressful context. Usually they haven't practiced doing it in the stressful context with, strangers, et cetera, et cetera. And you just want your dog to, feel good about children approaching. So that's kind of good news. Telling people giving your dog cheese is dog training, I guess.
I completely agree with you. I think the science part is super important. Every single one of my clients, I always tell them I would like for you to get Kim Brophy's Meet Your Dog. And if you don't do anything else, I want you to read the chapter on your dog's breeds. So if it's a guardian breed or if it's a hunting breed or whatever, I want you to read that chapter and I want you to learn about some of the behaviors and some of the traits and some of the stuff that you are probably seeing and don't recognize what it is. Almost every single client comes back and they're like, yeah, my dog does do that. That makes so much more sense. Or I see that for what it is now. And then they start recognizing it in their day-to-day life. But also, to your point, little things for us are big things for dogs. And I always tell my clients that too. You cannot just do this one thing at home and then go out and add 15 people and a hot dog truck and expect your dog to be like, oh yeah, I still know how to do that thing. Expectation levels are way too high. And until we teach people how to kind of step their dogs through things, that's where people are going to continue to struggle.
Yeah. And a lot of times people want to start much later down the line. I had a family member whose dog was aggressive with my dog and they were like, okay, tell me how to stop this. As if like it was like a quick fix. And I was like, well, yeah, I was like, we got to go big picture here. And are you ready to do that? There's not just like, some magic key to this.
Yeah.
Of course,
backwards to forwards.
Yeah. I mean, of course you get to the point where like management is key. Fortunately, we are able to control our dogs' worlds to a great extent. I do think it's harder in a lot of ways for city dog owners, especially out on the street. You can't control everything that's going on the way that you can if you have an acre of property. Having mostly worked with urban dogs for the last 15 years, I really believe that the people who do put in the work and dogs, who are able to live in the city. Certainly, like some dogs are never going to be okay, city dogs. But when it's a good fit and someone is putting in the work, you have dogs who really can be pretty bulletproof, really can live very, very rich and interesting lives. More so often than dogs who live in the suburbs where they're not getting out very much, seeing other dogs. I just spent 2 weeks with my dog in the suburbs actually, and I watched her become more barky with every person she saw. She started barking at, because even on a walk, we'd see maybe 2 people, and I could see like aggression in her, and it was a reminder to me of how lucky we are that we have these opportunities every day to kind of like socialize her. We tend to think about socialization as something that's just for puppies, but really dogs are learning to feel okay about the world around them all the time, ideally, and all of that I think of as socialization. I do really like that book. I get hesitant about putting too much stock in breeds for a few reasons. One is so many dogs are a mix of so many breeds. And another thing is you might have a dog who really is the prototype of, I don't know, a Bernese Mountain Dog or Border Collie or whatever. But you might have one who's an extreme on one side or the other, and who's to say? Who's to say what you're going to end up with? Actually, one of my good friends we call her a couch potato Border Collie. I've also known dogs who you would think of are more lazy dogs who are super vigilant and on top of things. So I think that the Brophy approach, like I said, I like that book, but I have some hesitations about being too breedist, I would say, especially because I think some people make very broad ideas about breeds, say like, oh, I got this breed because I read in this, breed book that it's good with kids. At the end of the day, my personal approach is to look at them each as individuals. And secondly, to think about like them as dogs, because as dogs, most dogs have more in common with other dogs than they don't. And most dogs, I think, also have more in common with people than we give them credit for. One point I try and make in the book is if you think about all the species who've ever existed in the world over the last 4.5 billion years, only 1% of all species still exist. 99% of species have gone extinct. And the fact that not only are dogs and humans not extinct, not only are we vertebrates, mammals, we live in the same climate, have similar dietary needs, we live on land, we have actually so much in common with dogs that I don't think it's that crazy to start with thinking about yourself before you start thinking about my dog is a border terrier, thinking about my dog is an animal that exists on this earth and is operating under the same laws of science, whether the science is gravity or the science of behavior or whatever, starting with all the things we have in common with them and then going to all the things all dogs have in common. Personally, in my approach, I tend to think about breed like third, fourth, or fifth, maybe, right when I started working on my book. And I was like, this is a really good book. Maybe I don't need to write a book. Maybe she already wrote it.
It's a really good book. I am also very much the same. Every dog is different. That's actually our show motto is every dog is different and every human is too. And so I like for people to not focus on breed so much either. But I also find that if people, like you said, with science, and most people are very breed focused, they know what breed their dogs are. It's very much easier to get them in line with this is how we're going to move forward. This is why we're doing this. If they understand these are the characteristics and that's why I'm talking to you about this, not because your dog is a border collie, not because your dog is a Malinois, not because your dog is a German Shepherd, but because these are more tendon in your breed of dog. But like you said, it might not be the case. You might have a lazy Malinois, or you might have a lazy border collie. You might have a really high-strung Chihuahua that likes to chase balls and play games instead of sit in your lap and bark at the neighbor or something. There are definitely big differences, but for most people, it's a good way to at least be like, okay, here's our baseline, but this is only our baseline. Let's build from this and see which direction we go from here.
It's like a way in.
There's a lot of jargon, a lot of terminology, a lot of big words. Even management can be a word that is scary when we talk to our clients because they're like, well, wait, what does that mean? What does management mean? What are we managing? It's like, okay, well, it's really not that big of a deal. It just means we're putting up a baby gate here.
Yeah. In the book, I guess you could say, in working with clients, I developed sort of a framework that I found helpful, which I call the dog training triad. All of it's about environment in the end, but breaking it down into what I call management, timing, and rewards. And I think of as management as basically like everything you can buy on Amazon to change your dog's behavior, like everything that you can like do from the outside in to change the way your dog is existing in the world. That might be a baby cage. I use the term management. I'll extend it to work to eat toys. How can I manage my dog's energy? I'll extend it to muzzle, of course. How can I absolutely keep my dog from biting? Management might be how much exercise am I getting the dog? And then within that, also part of the environment is how we're rewarding behaviors. And I think it's really important to figure out what is rewarding to your dog, what you can use to reinforce behaviors you like. Again, sort of a pleasantly easy way in, I think, right? Figure out what your dog likes. Like you could probably think of, 5 things off the top of your head, but it's a fun experiment, right? To figure out like
it sure is.
What currency you can use. And I try and give some, examples of exercises you can use to figure it out. But, sure, start with cheese, hot dogs, whatever. Then the third part is, how you're going to be able to give that stuff with really good timing, which, does take some skill, does take some finesse in some cases, but in other cases, like we were saying, if you're just trying to like create an association, sometimes it really is just about raining down the cheese, make it rain. Sometimes the timing actually even isn't that important. But when it is important, that's what's so cool about like the technology behind the training and the development of clicker training. Very first time I saw a clicker, I was like, that's so silly. I don't need a thing to train my dog. I don't need one of those. And now, of course, I think, oh my God, it's so amazing how this totally simple little piece of technology could do so much and has so much history behind it and not battery operated. I could go on and on about how much I love clickers. Although, of course, I'm also like, if you don't want to use one, you don't have to use one. Really optional. But I think that it's really cool that this technology developed and I try and tell the story of the clicker. I'll share share a link with you. I did a
Yeah.
history of clicker training, like a 20-minute history of clicker training that leads to some of the stuff in the book. But
yeah, do share it, and we'll share it in the episode notes so that everybody can do it. And that's the clicker I held up here. Your team sent me this clicker along with the book. And one of the things that I really like about it, one, is that it has the thing so that it can go around your hand so that it's easy accessible. But also, I'm going to click it for you guys. You guys hear that? There are so many different clickers out there, and some of them are very aggressive and very abrasive. So make sure when you're choosing a clicker, if you guys decide to use a clicker with your dog, that you pick one that does not scare your dog.
Yeah.
Because we have used so many clickers over the years, and Fitz used to hide under the table when I would get the clicker.
Yeah. I mean, some dogs, it's never going to be the right solution. Clicker training, as I'm sure you know too, like it's a term that refers to basically marker training, but you don't actually have to use a clicker. You could use a word like yes, you could use a whistle or whatever. I really like this. I happen to have one on my desk. This little clicker, it makes like a tiny little noise.
Tiny.
Love it because you can just like slip it in your pocket. And actually on my website, anniegrossman.com, if you upload a receipt of having bought my book, I will send you, if it's in the mail, send you a little clicker.
Very cool. That's always good. People love to try out new things, and they love it when they can get something for free. So grab Annie's book and grab a free clicker while you're at it. One of the other things I want to talk about quick before we wrap up here in your book, I loved that you used real life experiences, but I also love that you talked about your dad and how he trained his dog and your experience with him and how that turned some light bulbs on for you. I think that it's really important in the evolution of dog training to reflect on those things and how differently dogs were maybe when we were kids versus how they are now for our kids. I just thought that it was really neat that you went through that whole thing with your dad, because he comes up a few times in the book, and the whole anecdotal training, and I think it was a TV show or whatever that he had been referencing. It was really neat to see you go, okay, wait, what can I learn from this? And how can I break this down and see if this is even accurate? And why did this work for him? So I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, I think it shows how little people understand that there is a science of behavior. My dad was extremely bright and very kind. I could give some examples of just like what a kind of like lovely, funny, kind person he was. And he was like really interested in science, but I don't think it ever really occurred to him that like science had anything to do with dogs. And he also came up in a time where, dogs have only been like inside animals for 75 years or so, and actually largely because of vaccines and like flea protection. We don't think about how important that stuff is, but the fact that we can have dogs who are vaccinated and not full of fleas has led to a lot more dogs in homes. So I mean, he grew up in a time where people were just sort of starting to bring dogs into their homes, and he very much saw himself as the dog's master. That was the word that he would use. And that there was, this clear power dynamic, and took for granted that you had to use force and punishment. And I think he would have like rolled his eyes at any sort of conversation about like the ethics of it or the morality of it, which I think, rubbed off on me in a way. I think before I became a dog trainer, I would have probably rolled my eyes too at a lot of the conversations out there about how we treat dogs. But now, of course, I think like it's so important, especially if you have kids, to show how you can change behavior without force and punishment and coercion, like how we can take care of these animals in our midst in ways that are both impactful, effective, and gentle and safe. But I don't think that was necessarily obvious to me from the get-go, just based on where I came from. After my dad died, and I talk about this in the book, I was on YouTube and I watched this video of this woman from the early 1980s who had a TV show on PBS. Her name was Barbara Woodhouse. And I realized, based on all the things she was saying, that this is where my dad got a lot of his ideas. And I know he watched a lot of PBS. And I was like, oh my God, this is weird. And I mean, and whether you're talking about her or Cesar Millan, they're kind of bad in different ways, I guess. But because Cesar Millan's on National Geographic, this one was on PBS, these are reputable outlets where we expect to get information that we can trust. And frankly, can't, at the end of the day, it's all about entertainment. Yeah. What's interesting about Cesar Millan is his sort of new age twist. Someone like Barbara Woodhouse and other iterations of her, I don't think had quite so much of the bent of you need to improve yourself to improve your relationship with your dog. I think it was a little bit more like yank, pull them, push them, just manipulate them to get her done, which by the way works. It's not that like you can't get behaviors that way. It's just, what are the consequences? What's the fallout? What's the fallout if you have, again, an animal in your home that literally might be sharing your bed or cuddling up next to your toddler? It's one thing if you have this outdoor animal, I guess, like I was saying, used to be more the way. The problem with training using these more traditional, you could call them methods of punishment, again, it's not that they can't be effective. They can be effective, but you're not using a scalpel, you're using a chainsaw, and there can be fallout. The fact is, dogs are so forgiving by and large. Not all of them, but by and large as a species, the reason that they're so successful is not because we're such good dog trainers. It's because they are willing to put up with a lot from us because they've been able to live off of our surpluses for so long. They've been able to live off 75% of the dogs in the world don't even live in homes, but they're still living off of our trash and our excess, and able to be forgiving and put up with the craziness that we put them through. The problem with punishment, it really is that it works, is that we can get away with it. But we know so much more now than we've ever known about dogs before. The field of the science of behavior is so rich, and we're learning more about behavior than any other generation has known. The canine cognition labs have exploded over the last few decades. If you're a dog lover, you're so lucky to have this animal that you can experiment with how to use positive reinforcement in a way that's effective and to get behaviors you want with this willing participant in your home with very low stakes. Book I talk about I love training tricks and silly stuff, but it's not because I'm looking to impress my friends or anything, or I need to put on a show. It's because to me it's a really fun way to watch how my dog is learning, and I find that that's really truly a hobby that I find improves both of our lives. And dog training as hobby is also sort of a new idea, right? People think if you have a horse, that's a hobby, but if you're doing dog training, it's you're solving a problem or trying to cross something off your list.
I agree with you. It's so funny that we have this kind of idea in our heads of what dogs should be and how they should be, when really our dogs are just kind of chill beings that just hang out, and they're more than happy to hang out. And if we didn't put them in uncomfortable situations, we probably wouldn't see a lot of the behaviors that we didn't like in the first place. And so to your point earlier, that our dogs just adapt to our environments and are not necessarily a result of our mood or whatever. If we would just relax a little bit sometimes and enjoy the moment with our dog, we would have so much more success in having that relationship and having the reactions that we want to see from our dog, just because, as you said, we're making them comfortable, we're making them happy, and we're really experiencing those moments.
Yeah, and what do you really need for your dog? Before my dad died, after I was a dog trainer, he used to get on my case that my dog would bark when people came to the door. He was like, "That's your dog is being bad," and I was like, "My dog is being a dog. Dogs evolved to bark. We bred barkiness into dogs, and it doesn't really bother me."
It doesn't bother me either. My dog barks at the door.
It's arbitrary what you think of as what your dog needs to know and doesn't need to know. I do think breeding is really, really important. Ideally, all dogs that are being bred should be bred for behavior and should be bred for their ability to live in current environments that people are wanting to put their dogs in. I think to some extent, there is a movement where that's happening, especially working in a shelter environment. You see dogs that are bred to be fighting dogs. It's not doing anyone any favors if you're breeding a dog for anything other than health and temperament, in my opinion.
Health and temperament are the two top things for me. I think that breeding dogs for coat colors or these strange fluffy Frenchies or things like that, we're entering into areas that are potentially tampering with things that we don't need to be tampering with. We need to set our dogs up for success in all ways, and scientifically engineering how they look is not it, guys. It's just
no, but I think we can engineer other things about them. I really encourage people, if you're going to go to a breeder, which I don't think is a bad idea. I think there's also a stigma about that too. You should always get a dog from a shelter, which I don't think is necessarily true. I think it's really important to make sure that you're working with a breeder who is putting in the time and effort to improve the breed and make sure that they're breeding for behavior and temperament, and making sure to place dogs like in homes that are, that they can make the best guess like of what home is going to be right for which dog.
And not just pumping them out for cash.
No. And that's what's going to keep dogs out of shelters too.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Breeding and training, in my opinion, just like go hand in hand. And also important to find breeders who are, doing training from day one. Training doesn't happen when you start doing dog training. Like, dogs are always learning. And therefore, like, we have the opportunity to be their teachers always. A plug for the good breeders of the world.
Plug for we need the good breeders. Well, one more question before we wrap up, and that is, what would you like to leave the listeners with today?
Well, definitely, I hope everyone will check out my book. It's available on Amazon. It's also available as an audiobook. The audiobook is superb. And like I said, if you go to anniegrossman.com/book and upload your receipt, I will send you this cute little clicker. And also, I pulled a book off my shelf that's actually not about dog training, but it's just a really, really wonderful book that I recommend all the time to people that most people haven't heard of. It's called The Millennium Man. Are you familiar with this book? No. It's this really weird little book that is about the science of behavior, but more specifically about kind of how crazy it is that we've made such huge strides and so much in helping people understand so many aspects of science, and yet like the science of behavior has kind of been left behind. Like I said, many people think it's a pseudoscience and don't really realize that it actually should be taught probably like in biology departments. It's sort of weirdly nestled into psychology departments a lot of the time. And it tells the story of Leonardo da Vinci coming back from the past into, I think it's like the year 2000, and kind of how he goes through the world marveling at all the mistakes people are making because of a lack of understanding of all the advances that have been made in so many aspects of science since his time, but that how the science of behavior is still so poorly understood, and how like so many of the problems of the world are because of that. So it's a really weird, fun read that I think would be enjoyable for anyone who likes to nerd out about behavior.
I will have to check that out and then reach out to you so we can chat about it.
Yeah.
It was amazing having you here today. Thank you so much. And you guys, here again is the book, How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science. You guys should definitely check it out. It's a really good read. And the Audible book, I will vouch, was phenomenal. If you are into audiobooks, that is the way to go. Yeah. It's so good.
It's so weird to like, it's so scary to the idea of like someone else reading your work. When I actually listened to it, I was like, oh, thank God, this person is so good. Her name is Eunice Wong, and she just really nailed it. So it was so.
She really did a great job.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Annie via her website and check out the School for Dogs. And we will see you guys next week on Straight Up Dog Talk.